What's that? I missed 2 or 3 months of recording a video and failed to upload anything? Oh, well. Shit. Anyway, here's how I made Dark Repulser. I started off with a stencil like I usually do, only because this sword is symmetrical, I only have to make half a stencil so that I can flip it over and it'll definitely be the same on both sides. I then cut it out with the jigsaw. This sword is exactly the same on both sides, so I'm only going to be showing the process on one side. I sanded down the edges to get rid of any rough parts. And then I used a planer to thin out the blade. I sketched out roughly where the bevels on the blade went, so I'd have a guideline to follow as I was sanding it. Next, I stenciled out the raised parts of the guard on a sheet of MDF. I also measured and marked where I needed to cut 2 pieces off a 15mm dowel. Since MDF dust is toxic, it's really important to wear goggles, a dust mask and safety cat ears when you're working with it. And for the dry shites that message me whinging about how dumb safety cat ears are, they're actually to keep my fringe out of my face while I work. I'm only having a crack when I say it, so chill your face. Anyway, I cut out the handle and the raised parts of the guard with the jigsaw. The extra piece on the handle is to make sure the handle is thicker and more comfortable to hold, and it also reinforces it a bit. I also cut the 2 dowels to size. Before I attached any of those pieces, I used a bench sander to bevel the edges of the blade. Since I don't have a bandsaw and I really didn't fancy losing some of my fingers to my jigsaw, my best option for getting the dowel down to half size was to sand half of each one off, and I rounded off one end of each one. Once all that was done, I glued all the pieces down on each side. Even though the glue was very strong on its own, I drilled some pilot holes and screwed them into place just to make sure they definitely weren't able to shift. I started to sand them down and I very quickly got frustrated because I'd actually made them way too thick and I just couldn't get them into a good shape. After a while of trying to make it work, I eventually just gave up and glued the dowels down instead for a break. When I went back to the sanding, I just came to the conclusion that they were pointless, so I used a sanding disc on my Dremel to separate them from the part that I wanted to keep, and then took out the screws and just chiseled them off. This made me realise exactly how strong my wood glue actually is because I couldn't actually get it all off with a chisel and I had to sand off the excess. So, good wood glue hold, 10 out of 10. As soon as those pieces were gone, it was way easier to shape the edges exactly how I wanted. For the last bit of the sanding, I used my Dremel to do any of the smaller bevels that I couldn't do with the bigger sander. I also used it to round off the top of the handle and then rounded off the rest of the handle with the bench sander. While I was doing that, I also sanded off the bit of the pommel that I'd originally cut into the wood because I figured it would just be easier to make the whole thing out of clay, which was what I did next. I used a white air drying clay for the details on the guard of the pommel. Once all the pieces were dry, I glued them into place. The clay I'm using really isn't that great, and it has a tendency to crack as it dries, so I filled in any of the gaps with more clay and wood filler. Once all that was done, I moved on to painting. I forgot to record the dremeling the bit on the dowel, but I just used a small sanding bit for it. I used acrylic paint for this, and to make sure that it was covered completely evenly all over the sword, I did 2 coats. Also partly because the first coat is usually pretty messy because I'm lazy, so the second coat is a good way to clean it up. I stuck a little fake gem on each side, keeping the consistency of my builds to always be at least temporarily blinging. This is the first sword that I've made that hasn't had a wrapped handle because there's actually a decorative piece on it. So for that, I got a little metal ruler and I used a big ass nail to just etch in details. I didn't record this bit either, but after all the paint had dried, I sprayed it with 2 coats of gloss varnish. I used a vinyl floor lino for the sheath. I was making an elucidator at the time, so I figure I'll just show you making both of those sheets. For each one I cut out 2 identical pieces of lino. I marked out every inch along the edge and pinned the 2 pieces together. I used a hole punch on one side at a time, then to make sure the holes were even on both pieces, I used a black biro and drew circles in each hole, so that when I was doing the other side I could see exactly where to cut. I used a hot glue gun to glue the sides and then painted them completely black with acrylic paint. Lastly, I wrapped it with a stretchy yarn fabric and I used the glue gun to hold the end pieces in place.
Ta-da!
So that's how I made that one anyway. I don't actually have the physical sword to show you like I normally would because it was actually a commission and it and the elucidator in the video got sent over to the UK. If there's anything that you'd like to see me build, then leave it in the comments below and I might make it sometime. I did say that I was going to be doing a sword giveaway at 1,000 subscribers and I'm about 50 away from that now, so I will still be doing that, but you have to be subscribed to enter that, and once I actually hit 1,000 I'll go into detail about how to enter and stuff. Here is my last video, you can click on that or the link is in the description if you want to watch that. Here's a video that I just like and think you should watch. I try to upload sword videos once a month, it clearly doesn't go too well, but I'm working on it. If you want, you can follow me on all my social medias, it's them there and they're also linked in the description. If you fancy that, then power to you, off you go. That's all for this video anyway then, so be sweet, be strange, be kind, and don't be an asshat, and I'll see you in the next video. So, sláinte!